If the world seems so confusing, Mark will be glad to clear that up for you. Call him now at 877-381-3811.
Before we go back to Muhammad, I asked a friend of mine to come on this program to walk through a few things with us, and I think you'll find this fascinating. He's a friend of mine, Phil Kerpen. He's Vice President for Policy at Americans for Prosperity, and we talk about this all the time, the massive regulatory state that our country has become, and that the Obama administration has unleashed all this stuff against us. And remarkably, Phil Kerpen was very prescient about this, and he wrote a book about it called Democracy Denied, How Obama is Ignoring You and Bypassing Congress to Radically Transform America and How to Stop It. Phil Kerpen, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, you know, Phil, almost every day he's now signing some executive fiat doing exactly that, and he's proud of it, and I could play clips of all of his members of his party in Congress saying, well, he has to do this, he has to do these things. What gave you the idea to do this, and about when did you come up with it?
Well, you know, I've been tracking really since the health care and Dodd-Frank laws passed. It was apparent to me that this guy had exhausted any goodwill he had with the public or Congress, and nothing was going to get through the legitimate process. And so I'd been sort of tracking the illegitimate processes that he was using to move things forward. But what really convinced me that I had to write this book was the day after the election last year, and it's just about exactly 1 year ago. The day after the election, the president was asked, what happens to cap and trade now? And he infamously said, oh, that was only one way to skin the cat. I've got other ways to do, other means to accomplish that end. And, of course, he turned to the EPA, wrote it right into their budget to pursue those same disastrous policies. And at that point, I said, you know, this is too much. I've got to catalog all of this and get it out there as a book. And I did. And, Mark, the timing's unbelievable because this week, every single day, he's saying, you know, I'm doing a mortgage bailout, I'm doing a student loan bailout, I don't care about Congress at all. So he's really taken it to even another level since I wrote the book.
But what's fascinating about your book is you kind of lay out for everybody, step by step, area by area, what he's been up to. And he's built on top of this. I mean, from financial regulations, as you point out, health care regulations. But what does this do to our society when a president conducts himself this way?
Well, I think it obliterates the separation of powers that our founders thought was so critical to prevent tyranny. And, you know, all of Article 1 establishes that Congress has legislative power, Congress writes the laws, Congress has power of the purse, and so on. And the left was up in arms about everything that Bush did that they believed stepped on legislative prerogatives of Congress, the signing statements and the wiretaps and the rest of it. Obama campaigned against all of that. He came in, continued all of those policies, and pushed the same type of autocratic rule in the domestic policy area as well. And if we don't do something about that, if we don't demand that Congress resume its rightful role as the legislative branch, we're going to have a 4-year elected dictator that can do whatever he wants. And I don't think that's the kind of country we want to be in.
And you call this regulatory tyranny, and I couldn't agree more. And what does this do to our economy?
Well, it's devastating economically. It's devastating not just because of the tremendous uncertainty that comes from bureaucrats and regulators being able to essentially make it up as they go without respect to actual legislation, but under this administration, every time they get any certainty at all, every time one of these rules goes final, it's so onerous that it makes it so that employers can't afford to hire folks. And so this has really, really been devastating. There was a new Gallup poll out earlier this week that said the number one concern of small businesses is the regulatory burden. Regulations in this country now cost employers over $10,500 per employee. For small businesses, that's only going up. There are going to be thousands of rules coming out of Obamacare and Dodd-Frank, all of this mischief, with 40-year-old environmental laws being twisted for the global warming agenda and so on. And so this problem is one of the major reasons that businesses are sitting on cash. I mean, they don't know what it's going to cost them to add an employee, so they can't do it. They got to sit and wait and hope for an all-clear sign that the regulations are going to, the onslaught is going to stop, and that's not coming under this administration.
And what about personal liberty? I mean, for instance, with respect to the effort by this administration through regulation to compel individuals to be members of unions.
Well, I think there's a tremendous loss of freedom and liberty as well in all of these regulations, and a lot of it is to serve the union agenda. That's a major thrust. We've got the National Labor Relations Board stacked with former SEIU lawyers trying to rewrite labor laws without going to Congress, take away private ballot rights, and sue Boeing for the temerity of locating in a non-union state. But this is the basic conflict in worldviews, I think, between people like us who believe in freedom and believe individuals are competent to run their own lives, make their own choices, make their own decisions, and the folks in this administration and the college professors and the elites and the people who think they're better than we are. I mean, we've got a guy in the White House, Cass Sunstein, the regulatory czar who oversees all these rules, who wrote a book about how we need to construct decision frameworks to nudge people towards the right decisions, and so they'll make the right decisions that we think are right for them. And that, I think, is the mentality that underlines all of these regulations. And I think it's a very pernicious mentality, and I think it's wrong. I think that that kind of central planning fails every time it's tried.
I'm talking to Phil Kerpen. His book is Democracy Denied, How Obama's Ignoring You and Bypassing Congress to Radically Transform America, and How to Stop him. How do we stop him?
Well, Mark, the legislation that I'm really, really excited about is a bill called the REINS Act, the Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny Act, H.R. 10 in the House, where it's sponsored by Jeff Davis. It's got 188 co-sponsors, just cleared the House Judiciary Committee this week, and it's S-299 in the Senate, where it's Republican Rand Paul and Democrat Joe Manchin who are the lead sponsors. And this bill says we're going to go back to Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution that says Congress writes the laws, and this bill says no regulation that is economically significant, that has a significant impact on the economy, can take effect unless Congress has voted to approve it and the President has signed it, or if the President vetoes it, Congress overrides it. So it says for these rules that basically are laws that have an impact on the economy, we're going to follow the process that the Constitution lays out. And I think that would go a long, long way, not to ending all regulation, but to ending regulation without representation. So when these terrible things come down, if they do take effect, you know exactly who to blame because you know who voted for it. So that's the main thing, and I got the whole backstory of that bill in the book. It came from this amazing 78-year-old guy in Kentucky who had the idea, and I think that goes a long way. But ultimately, I think it's on us as citizens and as voters and as activists to say we're going to demand better, and that we're going to demand that Congress stand up to the regulators and the bureaucrats, that the President bear responsibility for the bureaucracy as well, and that we're not going to accept nameless, faceless bureaucrats telling us how to live our lives. We're going to demand better.
The book is Democracy Denied. You can go on marklevinshow.com. We link to it on my social sites. We link to it. You can go directly to Amazon.com. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a compelling book about what's going on and what's been going on in this country. Phil Kerpen, I want to thank you, my friend, and it is a pleasure to know you and a pleasure to be associated with your organization as well.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, and I look forward to seeing you here in Washington coming up next weekend.
November 5th, baby. All right, you take care. God bless. This is a great book, Democracy Denied by Phil Kerpen. As a matter of fact, I endorse it right on the cover. And I say it's a must-read for everyone who values our nation's bedrock principles. And he goes into this in great detail, including what we can do, including that legislation you just heard about. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there are things we need to do. When people like Phil Kerpen come forward and they explain these things and they tell us there's things we can do, we ought to really pay attention. It's a great book. You can get it on Amazon.com. Actually, you can get everything going to my website, marklevinshow.com. Democracy Denied. This was a prescient book because every day Obama's saying, I'm going to do this, I'm not waiting. What's his phrase now? We can't wait? Now, Phil Kerpen could have called his book, We Can't Wait. Instead, he calls it Democracy Denied, which is actually the truth. We can't wait means democracy denied when it's practiced by Obama. And he's a great guy and a very intelligent guy. Democracy Denied by Phil Kerpen. How much time do I have?